Hello and welcome to the fourth day of the Women's Forum for the Economy and Society. I am Francesca Donner and I'm going to be your host for today. And I am delighted to introduce our topic, which is empowered business. We already know that entrepreneurship by women and other underrepresented minorities is a critical part of an inclusive recovery. The question is, how can powerful, purposeful leadership create the environment for suppliers and entrepreneurs to succeed and to scale up? Well, we hope that all these questions will be answered. I'm sure they are complicated. And we are going to move on right away because we have a huge agenda for you. So to start, we are going to have a few words from the Managing Director of the Women's Forum for the Economy and Society. I'd like to introduce Audrey Cherkoff.
Thank you, Francesca. And what an honor it is to be here welcoming you all to the fourth and last of our digital days dedicated to women in business and entrepreneurship. As you may know, the work we are doing at the Women's Forum to promote women's empowerment in business is based on a simple reality. We know that our economy will thrive only if men and women participate equally as entrepreneurs. Today, people are expecting and demanding gender equality in entrepreneurship. And according to the Women's Forum G20 barometer, more than 80% of the G20 population, 80%, is ready to accept the implementation of strong measures to fight gender inequalities in business, because people are conscious now that this will really generate benefits for women entrepreneurs, but for the companies and ultimately for the economy and society as a whole. But still, progress towards closing gender gaps in supply chains and entrepreneurship is far too slow. And today, a third of entrepreneurs globally are women. Yet they benefit from less than 1% of private and public investment, which is nothing. It's a shocking statistic. And moreover, due to the COVID-19 crisis, now it's 90% of women-owned businesses that have experienced a decrease in revenues. So there is no two way around it. The situation today is too critical not to act. And the Women's Forum is committed to accelerating women's economic empowerment in business and in the supply chain through the work of our daring circle, Women for Business, our think tank Women for Business that's active all along the year. And since its inception, the circle has focused on raising awareness on the crucial role of inclusive sourcing to achieve women's economic empowerment. But the reality is that we want to do more than raise awareness. Our objective is to provide companies with concrete tools to overcome the barriers in inclusive sourcing and to advise them as well on specific actions that they can take to advance gender inclusivity in their supply chain. With this mission, we have developed as well a toolkit for action, for concrete action, that provides a company with essential tools to implement diverse supplier programs over the long term. And that toolkit consists of three main elements. First one, the inclusive sourcing journey tool developed with our partner Kearney and the legal guide for affirmative action created with the support of Clifford Chance. Finally, I'm proud as well to announce the publication of the third and last component of this toolkit, the communication guide to highlight the business case and success stories on inclusive sourcing. To respond to the urgency of the current crisis, we have also seen the necessity to directly and concretely support women entrepreneurs. That's why we launched the Women Entrepreneurs for Good initiative in March 2021, Women Entrepreneurs for Good initiative, in collaboration with Procter & Gamble and HCC Innovation Entrepreneurship Center. It's an accelerator program. And together this year, we supported 9 green entrepreneurs, women, to innovate and grow their projects. So I want you to join us tomorrow when we will launch the second edition of this amazing initiative during the global meeting at the Carrousel du Louvre, and as well, everything will be screened online. And all of this would not have been possible without the support of our partners, Procter & Gamble as lead of the Women for Business Daring Circle, as well as L'Oréal, Publicis Group, Kearney as our knowledge partner, and Clifford Chance, and WeConnect as well as our institutional partner. So now let's deep dive and let's discuss how we can give women entrepreneurs more chances and means to honor and empower their talents.
Thank you, Audrey. All my favorite words: innovation, action. Let's get going. So for our first conversation, we are going to do a fire starter, and I'd like to introduce the two participants. We have Sayegh, who is a Senior Vice President Supply Chain at P&G. And we also have Priya Selvaraj, who's a Managing Director at Naturblatt. Over to you two. Let's hear what you've got to say.
Thank you, Francesca. Delighted to be back on stage, although virtual this time. But let me quickly introduce myself. My name is Sayegh. I lead supply chain for Europe and the global supply network for P&G. And again, when I say I'm delighted to be back, because we have been with the Women Forum for quite so many years, bringing to life our sincere and deep commitment in equality and inclusion, and more focus in the space on women economic empowerment. And, it goes without saying, a company with our legacy, with our reach, with our brand, with our assets, we have first a moral obligation to be a big play as a force of good and a force of change. So this is a moral imperative. And at the same time, it's also good for business, impactful on the community where we operate. So I'm really delighted to have been part of the journey, and that's where Priya and myself will have a discussion on the work she has been doing on the part of being the woman entrepreneur for good. But before I go, with Priya to have a bit of connect on the work she has been doing, P&G over the past several years have been very active on ensuring we support woman-owned or woman-led businesses. We have committed for more than $5 billion of our spend pool to make it available for diverse, underrepresented, businesses, and more so within our space on woman-owned, woman-led. So I'm really, really, proud of the work we're doing. But I believe all of us, P&G and the like of the space and the scope of P&G, we have a lot of more work to do because we owe it to ourselves, we owe it to the community where we operate. I'm going to stop here and turn it to Priya to introduce herself, and I have a couple of points that Priya and myself would like to engage with today. Priya, over to you.
Thank you, Faraz. So I'm Priya Selvaraj, founder of the startup Naturblatt, based in Frankfurt, Germany. I'm here today because I'm part of this incredible program, Women Entrepreneurs for Good. At Naturblatt, we offer dishes and food packaging solutions to food businesses, which are 100% sustainable and are manufactured by the rural women self-help groups in India. So currently, we have to deal with the global supply chain disruption. So let me ask you, Faraz, as a global supply chain leader, what measures could you suggest for a startup like Naturblatt to survive this terrible disruption that's happening right now?
Them in 3 points. First, you as the leader. Second, your people and the people you're working with and through. And third, your business model and specifically your supply chain. Let me start by you as a leader. Our experience and my personal experience, and something that you will see it as an up and coming entrepreneur and a leader. First, you have to make sure you equip yourself with the characteristic of a growth mindset. Because you as a leader alone, and I'm sure you're phenomenal, and I have had the chance to see you and meet you, it's exceptional what you're doing. But even that, you alone will not be able to solve all the problem and create the next innovation and breakthrough. Hence, having growth mindset that allow you and enable you to listen to people around you, working for you or next to you, internally or externally, is going to be key, because that is the number one ingredient for successful leaders. Second, put at the center a diverse team. And I underline the word diverse team, different point of view, different culture, different gender, and so on. Because when you do that, that's where you start really the breakthrough, the innovation, the creativity, because you're tapping on this phenomenal, diverse group that hopefully you will have them working with you in your company or across your suppliers and customers. And the third, learning more during the pandemic, make sure you really understand where are the challenges in your supply chain. Because today, we are all in the business of supply. All of us, whatever industry, you're in the business of supply. And the pandemic have truly challenged all elements of our supply chain. So think of agility and understand what does it mean in your business space, and think of resiliency. Because if you do them well, along with your growth mindset, along with a diverse set of creative people at the center of anything and everything you do, you will be available for the consumer where others could not do. So that will be my, 3 points for you to remember them, and I'm sure you will, and drive it through.
Thank you very much.
Now, Priya, I have a question for you. First, since we met in March until now, I was, following you, and I'm amazed that you more than multiplied by 7. Okay, your company in terms of growth. So well done. You're off to a great start. Tell me first, how can you make sure you can sustain, this level of growth and move forward to the next, call it S-curve or a breakthrough? How are you doing it? How you're ensuring that you can continue on that path?
Mm-hmm. Yes. So when we talk about sustainability, more of us first we relate it to the environment, but it's also about the people, and that's why we strongly emphasize in our business model. So we are not only giving a sustainable alternative for plastic disposable, but we are also giving it in the most sustainable way possible by empowering the rural women self-help groups who are producing them. We have learned that we can progress also as a social business by proving that we are economically viable and we are scaling up without compromising on the core aspect of sustainability about the environment and the people together. I think this is the heart and soul of our business, Naturblatt. And yeah, we have these 2 points in mind when we are scaling up.
Priya, I'm reassured, and I'm sure you're on the right path. So well done. And again, as we close the short dialogue with Priya, I want to reiterate that we should all be committed to engage and create an inclusive workspace, a community, a society, and focusing on truly, women-owned, women-led businesses. Because you wouldn't be surprised if I tell you more than 90% of the companies led or owned by women were mostly impacted during the pandemic. So we owe it to all of us, to each other, to ensure that within our assets, within our brands, through our people, through our reach, to be truly active on that space to make a difference and make an impact. I also would like to ensure that today, whoever is following us, to stay tuned for the next panel to talk of how we're going to truly bring to life this whole concept of women-owned and women-led businesses. So thank you so much, and I'm looking forward to be back again in this phenomenal forum that's truly making an impact in our world. Thank you. Francesca, I'm turning it back to you.
Thank you so much, Faraz and Priya, and for specifically focusing on inclusion, which is just so important. I think we're going to hear that word a lot today. So before I turn it over to our next panel, we're going to have another quick fire starter. It's a quick chat from Shamina Singh, and she is the EVP of Sustainability and President and Founder of Mastercard Center for Inclusive Growth. So let's quickly turn it over to her. It will be a video.
Hello, my name is Shamina Singh, and I'm the founder and president of the Mastercard Center for Inclusive Growth. I'm also the Executive Vice President for Sustainability here at Mastercard. It's a great honor to be with you all today to talk about women and small business, especially when it comes to micro and small businesses. We know that women around the world comprise about $20 trillion of purchasing power globally. We also know that when women start small businesses, they think about job creation from the very beginning. They're thinking about growth. When you put job creation together with purchasing power, that's a recipe for success I think we can all get behind. We started a program looking at that specifically. We call it the Strive program. And the idea is that if you digitize, if you streamline your back office procedures, if you help get access to capital, and if you help train on the power of the e-commerce economy, you have a better chance of success at growing your business. We also know that if you join this program, or if you join any program focused on digitization, you have a better chance of success. The world is changing so rapidly. And for any segment of the economy where women are starting small businesses, if you can digitize, if you can streamline your back office, if you can get training and get access to the e-commerce economy, you'll have one foot in the door of the future. Those are the types of things I'm sure you're going to hear from the other panelists today as they talk through the specific challenges, but also the opportunities of women growing micro and small businesses. I'll leave you with one thought and turn it back over to the moderator, and that is access to credit. We know that around the world, it's hard enough to start a business, but we also know that you have to have access to capital. For many women, collateral isn't the thing that they can put in front of a banking process. So what we've done in some parts of the world, we're expanding it quickly, is we're creating proxies for credit score. We're using the buying and selling of products and services, both on the behavior side, but also the data from distributors, and taking those to banks so that banks will see those as a proxy for credit score. Women may not have tractors, but they're doing the work. So when you can combine the data with the technology and use that as collateral, you're insured a business loan at a regulated lower business interest rate. That's power, and that's the power of credit. And that's just one step that I think we can all take together to recognize that it's going to take creative, data-driven, digital-first, technology-based, underpinned by training solutions to ensure that women grasp the power of the digital economy. Good luck with the session today. I'll turn it back over to the moderator, Imran. Thank you again.
Hi there. Sorry, you got me again. So that I can introduce the moderator, Imran Dasu is a partner at Kearney, and he is going to take the next panel, a conversation looking at scaling women-owned and minority-owned suppliers. Imran, over to you, please.
Francesca, thank you, and hello and a warm welcome to everyone from myself. And Shamina, thank you for those valuable insights. They were highly relevant and really specific, and I'm sure we're going to get some more of those from our excellent panel. Firstly, myself, partner at Kearney, global strategy and consulting firm. I'm also Kearney's global head for our sustainable and responsible procurement practice. And through that, I'm proud to be the knowledge partner to the Women for Business Daring Circle, which, as many of you will know, is focused on increasing diversity in supply chains. Most importantly and most immediately, I'm going to be your moderator for this important discussion today. Many small and mid-sized companies, women-owned, minority-owned enterprises, they face some serious challenges, and we heard about some of those earlier in the conversation. Their innovation and leadership can lead to great impact, but they need scale. And how do we get that? And we heard some of the ideas coming from Shamina there, which were excellent. But what does it mean also for organizations who are looking to tap into this source of talent, innovation, and I believe advantage? How can organizations do that? What are the constraints that are stopping them, and how are they overcoming those constraints? Let's be honest here, the last 30, 40 years, supply chains have become simpler. They've become more globalized. It's led to fewer, larger suppliers, resulting in efficient supply chains, yes, lower costs, yes, but not necessarily resilient supply chains, as we've seen through COVID. So how do we get the right balance? To explore these kinds of topics and to share their unique perspectives, I'm really, really excited to have with me today Khalida Brohi, who's the Executive Director at the Sughar Foundation, Camila Escobar, the CEO of Procafecol, a coffee company from Colombia, Shidi Ramajose, who is the Public Affairs, Communication and Sustainability Executive Director at Coca-Cola Africa, and last but not least, Joël Ziliox, the Vice President of Europe, Market Operations and Purchases at P&G. Let's get started. I'd like to invite each of the panelists to introduce themselves, particularly to share with us, with the audience, why this topic is particularly important to them and how they came to really be actively driving it and shaping it for their respective organizations and for society more broadly. Khalida, can we start with you, please?
Thank you so much, Imran. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm already really looking forward to hearing everyone because it's just been beautiful so far. My name is Khalida Brohi, and I'm from Balochistan in Pakistan. I started my journey about 15 years ago when I was still a teenager after my cousin was murdered in the name of a custom called honor killings. She was murdered by my uncle, and it was a very normal thing, but it really, really impacted me in such a way that I stopped going to school. And eventually, of course, I was forced to go back to school, but eventually I started my work and instantly became this person who was representing the tribal women in Pakistan, getting hundreds and hundreds of women out on the streets and protesting the laws and everything. But it took me many years, and I eventually discovered that advocacy is very important. Trying to change the laws and everything is very, very important when it comes to issues like this. But the real impact is when you empower the women who are the victims, when you give them the resources to unleash the potential they have. And it was such a big shock learning this because I thought that systems are everything. But in countries like Pakistan, where, things are not according to the system, we still have tribal systems. My uncle is a tribal leader, and we follow the tribal law more. We do respect the constitution, but they go hand in hand. So we had to go back to the villages, work with these tribal men and the women, and eventually, it took us 10 years, eventually discover a solution where the women in these tribal communities start earning. And when they earn, everything changes. Of course, we educate them about their rights and use Islamic teachings also to make them realize that they do have rights and everything. But in the end, we give them grants to launch their businesses. And I'm not a businesswoman. I'm from a small village, and we still live in poverty in Pakistan. I have grown to become an entrepreneur. I speak around the world, but still learning to sustain their businesses was the hardest thing. And eventually we learned some of the things, and I'm excited to share that, as well as learn from the others to take back with me. Hope this helps. Thank you.
Thank you, Khalida. What a powerful intro. Thank you. Camila.
Good afternoon to all of my dear panelists, companions. It's really an honor and a pleasure to be this afternoon with you. My name is Camila Escobar. I am the CEO
of a company called Procafecol, but most of you wouldn't know that company. Most of you probably know the Juan Valdez coffee brand, which is an icon in the Colombian coffee growing scene. So I'm very proud to represent this brand that is owned by 540,000 Colombian coffee growers' families. But what brings me here today is the effort that we have been doing for around 3 or 4 years around women in coffee. So this is mostly a masculine industry. It has been led by men in Colombia and all around the world. And women are represented, but are represented as a workforce, are represented in the families, but they are not represented in the commercialization and in the value proposition, in the value chain, in the advanced value chain of the industry. So from 2017 till this year, we put in place an initiative that's called Mujeres Cafeteras, which is women coffee growers. And I proudly can tell you the news that this year, this program is a product, a line product in all the supermarkets, I hope, around the world, which brings the women a lot of opportunities that I'm sure we're going to talk about later, because they are 0.5% of the population, but they represent 30% of the registered coffee growers in Colombia. So we have a lot of opportunities there, and I'd love to talk about it later. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Camila. Shidi, can you share your story?
Can you hear me? Good afternoon, Imran, and good afternoon to my fellow panelists. I'm privileged to be here this afternoon, and I think when I thought of the question, for me, what stood out was the fact that I was born and raised by a very strong entrepreneurial mother. My dad died when I was just about 8 years old. Together with my 4 siblings, my very strong mother single-handedly raised us really out of her passion. So I guess it is no wonder that I find my career in this space, where I work to find ways to make sure that entrepreneurs, especially women, can realize their full potential. Having completed my studies in humanities at varsity, I started my career in human resources, working for a couple multinationals in the FMCG, alcohol and mining sector, the likes of Unilever, SAB Miller, and BHP Billiton. And I think after about 5 years in HR, working to ensure that people, especially women, get to realize their full potential, my passion led me to the space where I now head public affairs, communication and sustainability for Coca-Cola Beverages Africa. We are present in 14 markets on the continent. And I suppose for me, I've only been born here, raised in Africa. Africa is what I know. Africa is what I'm passionate about. And understanding that, in Africa, entrepreneurship, it is accepted to be an entrepreneurship. In fact, in some instances, it is the only option you have, to make a living. And what we do know, however, is that statistically and globally, it will reflect that most women still struggle to access and be successful entrepreneurs. And this is really driven by a couple of things. In particular, and Shamila mentioned this, issues and challenges around access to capital and access to market. And we know that this happens in our daily lives. Lack of profit parity as a result of gender biases. And some people might not understand this, but also serious, I would want to say, psychological barriers often experienced by women. Some people call it imposter syndrome, where you just never believe that you are good enough. And, I believe that we have a role, to Khalida's point, to show women what they're capable of and what their potential and worth can be in entrepreneurial space. What's also, interesting for me, and it talks to what Shamila alluded earlier on, the latest survey from that shows the startups in Africa and their ability to access funding reveals that in South Africa, about 84% of your women of funding that is available to support businesses, 84% of it is accessed by males. Now, this is obviously an issue for all of us that are here if we believe that to scale your businesses, you need to have access to capital. In other words, what this means is that for every $1 that is raised by your female-founded businesses, your male-founded businesses are able to raise about $17. What's also interesting further is the fact that for every $1 that is raised by your female team-founded businesses, your male teams-founded businesses get to raise about $288. Clearly, this then makes that we have no chance as women entrepreneurs. We still have a lot of work to do in ensuring access to finance and ensuring that our businesses, at least women-owned businesses, can scale up. Now, for me, I guess I find myself privileged to be in a position where daily I get to work for an organization that believes strongly in the role that women play, not only as business women, but also as entrepreneurs, and ensuring that we can facilitate their access to funding, to markets, and ensure that they get the right training to upskill the execution of their business ideas. And I suppose for me and my fellow panelists and people that have dialed in to join the conversation, the big question is, if businesses, especially women-owned businesses, are not able to access funding, how else do we expect them to scale? Yes, we can give them access to market, but access to market to organizations our size and PNGs and Kenny means you move from being a small business to becoming a very big business. Now you have to scale up your business to be able to meet the supply requirements that Imran, you're very familiar with from big companies our size. So I think until we resolve issues around access to capital in particular, we're not going to see the scale that we want to see for women-owned businesses. Thanks.
Thank you, Shidi. You're already raising a number of those challenges clearly that are structural, and I know we're going to get to some of those kind of practical ideas that you've all deployed. But before we do that, Joelle, would you please share your story?
Yes, good afternoon, and very privileged and honored to be part of this panel as well. So I'm Joelle Ziliox. I'm Vice President of Purchases in Procter & Gamble Europe. I'm married with 2 daughters and have 30 years of supply chain and purchases experience, working and living in 6 countries, 3 continents, Europe, Latin America, and Middle East and Africa. I have always passionately believed in equal opportunities and that everybody must have the opportunity to access to their full potential and to live their dreams. And this is deeply rooted in P&G's culture. P&G was one of the first companies in the 19th century to give access to jobs on manufacturing lines to women. And today, we have a very high number of senior executives in leader position and in our board. As I grew in responsibilities in P&G's, I've always passionately and relentlessly worked to achieve equal opportunities for everyone in my organization, amongst which gender equal representation. And then, we thought as a purchases organization, and we started that 20 years ago in North America with the work to develop supplier minority business in North America. So a small group of passionate people came together a few years back in P&G and say, how do we bring that to the rest of the world? And in my last role as leader of purchases in India, Middle East, and Africa, and in my current role as leader of purchases in Europe, and together with a passionate team, we are driving a program of women economic empowerment, and as part of that, driving and growing supplier diversity spend in our supply chain. So this is a moral imperative, and we believe it's a business growth opportunity. You've heard Sayegh, our leader of supply chain for Europe. It's not only a purchases program. This is embedded in the business leadership priorities. Our president, Loïc Tassel of Europe, has this embedded in his equality and inclusion program for the region. And I'm very pleased to be able to learn from you, ladies, and from this panel today, as well as share any experience which can provide help in that respect.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much to each of you. You've already in your intros already shared so many insights, and there's so much richness in all your backgrounds. And to continue in a similar vein, I think our audience will be really keen to hear from you, from your respective organizations. Which of the really specific challenges that you've seen? Shidi, you talked about access to capital, for instance, yeah, and we've read and heard about structural and behavioral challenges in a VC pitch process, potentially, right, that really favors males versus females, yeah. What other challenges have you seen, and how have you overcome them? What are the concrete actions you've taken, maybe structural, maybe behavioral, to overcome them? And maybe, Joel, if we start with you, I'm going to urge you all to be very, very specific, because you guys have the gems, and we need to get the gems shared and amplified across a much larger audience. So, Joel, please share.
So, of course, there is the largest challenges for often small businesses, women-owned business, is to be able to access large corporation, and sometimes it's as simple as getting known to those large corporations, being able to reach out, and then get the resources and capabilities to gain and compete and gain business with large corporations. But I would like to turn it around, and from my viewpoint, how do we have a responsibility to help small-sized businesses and women-owned business get access to large corporations and enable them? So I'd like to go a bit through the program or the recipe we've followed in our supplier diversity program. So first, and as I mentioned before, we drive this from the top. It's not a purchases only, a supply chain only initiative. It's embedded in our business priorities as P&G. So we got senior management and leadership support and advocacy for that. Second, and as a purchases and supply chain organization, it takes a lot of culture and process change within our own systems. So we have educated over 500 buyers in Europe, Procter & Gamble Europe organization, and equipped them with a framework and guidelines as to how to identify with women-led, women-owned business, how to increase the spend. It started by hard work on baselining. How much do we spend today? It's not very much, but it's already a good start. It's hard work to change the systems, being able to tag those businesses in our system so that we can actually measure and track progress. Okay, as part of our purchases process, we are educating our buyers to when they offer or they open a business for bidding, do you have diverse business available to bid for this? Can we grow as part of this new contract initiative the current business or identify new businesses? How do we include supply diversity as one of the elements of value that is brought by the suppliers? So it's not only about savings, it's not only about cash, it's not only about services, the key priorities of a purchases organization, it's also about diversity and bringing different type of elements to the supply chain. And then we scorecard and review progress at leadership level on a regular basis. And last but not least, we give rewards and recognitions to those elements of our purchases organization who drive the most progress. So I talked about leadership, driving from the top. I talked about buyers, education. We also have, as a third element, I would say, top-to-top discussion with large companies like P&G, who are not necessarily women-owned, women-led. And we have these discussions at top-to-top saying, what are you, Mr. Supplier, doing to encourage equality and inclusion in your own organization? And what are you doing? This is what we're doing. What are you doing, Mr. Supplier, in driving this in your own supply chain? And we call that second-tier spend, and we measure that as well. So that's the third element. And the fourth element, we are quite active, like, for example, today, or with companies or organizations like We Connect International or UN Women in driving capability building for women-owned, women-led business. So helping those often small businesses in capability building. We call it the P&G Academy. So these are the kind of 4 points I wanted to underline as to how we drive that within our company.
Thank you, Joelle. Shidith, same question to you, and maybe if I can also ask you to incorporate from Joelle's perspective. I heard something around, having a broader set of metrics, having a broader set, not just cost, not just savings. Can you, within your answer, please also share with us how are you articulating that narrative? Is this a trade-off? Is it a compromise? Or how are you articulating that this is actually win-win? This is good for business. This is not a compromise. Yeah.
Thank you. I mean, a lot of things for us, we look at it as this is like any other change in an organization. If you are going to effect change and effect it sustainably, you have got to win the hearts and minds of people. So yes, we do have similar things with leadership buy-in. Our group CEO leads this conversation and it filters across the organization. And I'll just use our South African market as an example. But I think for us, what's important is not just to rely on your top-down leadership. You require to mobilize the entire organization. If your organization is dependent only on your leadership, the question is what happens when leadership is not looking. So we've done a lot of work around culture and making this the DNA of our organization. One of my previous bosses used to say to me, if you do things the right way, you never have to worry about 1, your people, 2, your labor movement, 3, governments coming after you. And I think for us, it's understanding that we have to do the right thing, and we have to do the right thing all the time, and we have to take the people with us along the journey. So it's the DNA of the organization. It is what we do, and why we do it is to ensure that we can achieve our commercial objectives. And maybe if I carry on other elements, let me address the issue of how do we manage it with our supply chain organization. Interestingly enough, we do not incentivize anybody in the business for this. Your incentive is to work here. This is the ethos of the business. It is what we do. We plan to achieve our commercial objectives while we're driving diversity and inclusion in the business. So from top to bottom, we measure how diversified our business is, because your decision makers have to be diversified to be able to be comfortable to deal with issues of diversity and inclusion. So we make sure that our organization is really diversified in leadership, key leadership positions. You need to have women represented to drive these issues. Now, I'm not saying that male leaders don't drive these issues, but we need to have fairer representation, at least people that can lead with empathy from being in that space. And for example, we have a clearly articulated target of achieving 50% women in leadership by 2025. We're sitting at about 32% now. And if you look at our South African business, we're sitting around 42%, 46%. And that's just that leadership position. Across the organization, you're sitting at about 49%. So your organization is fundamentally transformed and inclusive. And that helps to make some of these changes stick. And you don't have to use the stick, but you use the hearts of people to really want to do this and do it for the right reasons. And so we believe that helps. We have ways of incentivizing people, but that is around achieving commercial objectives while you drive, transformation and inclusion. I think for me, common sense is that just like we applaud leaders for achieving targets and we applaud leaders for developing and building talent, it must just be taken for granted that we applaud leaders for driving inclusion, especially because it's at the core of what we want to achieve as a business and how we want to be perceived externally. Now, one of the other key challenges, spoken a bit about governments and regulators, and it's very clear in our minds that, and at the very least for our continent, you do need to have a supportive regulatory framework. Now, I'm not saying that we want to be managed through regulation and with governments, but it's not all corporates and all businesses that will do this and do it willingly. So your regulatory framework gives you some sort of a guideline and a framework that will mobilize businesses to do the right things. And so for me, I think we do need to drive and work in partnership with all stakeholders to ensure that we have a regulatory framework that supports inclusion of women and other marginalized organizations. So if you take that and you adopt the spirit of the regulations, there are so many wins that you can get out of it. So if you take our South African business, we took that and we said we are going to ensure that at a leadership level, we are represented accordingly, including at your management level. And I've already stated the numbers. But we also measured our spend. So, Joel mentioned earlier on that what are we spending today? And in 2017, we were spending close to about 4% on women-owned businesses, in particular Black women-owned businesses, because we also have a racial dynamic in our South African markets. We have since put in place deliberate measures, including a dedicated supplier development function. You've spoken about supplier development as a target, but we actually have a team that does this full time, and they manage your broader supply chain partners to ensure that when they deliver and source suppliers, they meet that criteria. And as a result, 2021 year to date, we're sitting at about 30% of our spend is being spent with women-owned businesses, in particular Black women-owned businesses. So this is a business KPI, not a supply chain KPI. And I think that's important, because what it means is that you don't make this a procurement or supply chain function, you make it a business function. The money owners, the cost center owners, the decision makers on which suppliers they want to use for what needs sits across your business. And so you have to align the entire business to make sure that you can achieve that and achieve it sustainably.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Thank you for that, Chidi. Camila, can I come to you with the same question? And I know economic inclusivity is particularly important. It's almost part of the business model, it seems, at your organization. But can you talk a little bit about how you've achieved that and how you've overcome some of the constraints to getting to that?
Sure. So I would have to build on some points that have been already said, and I'll try to maybe give other ideas as well. So first, I think the biggest challenge is a conceptual challenge for organizations. So what I mean by this is that we have, or we used to think, probably not the companies that are here today because they are already in a more advanced situation, but probably what we do is, and what we see is that we see companies that have a sustainability mindset and teams working on that, including inclusive purchases, including gender issues, including environmental issues. And then we have the business running in from another side. That's what we usually see. So what I mean by a conceptual challenge is bringing both of them together. And you do that with courage, basically. So you put in the center of your strategy the purpose of your company. And that has to be done with courage. And what do I mean by courage? Because around the decision-making process that involves bringing the purpose and the strategy together, you have to make a lot of bets. And as its name says, you when you have a bet, you have risks and you have to dare. And some of those bets might come in a good way, and some of them might not bring the output that you projected. But what I can tell you is that when we talk about bringing inclusive purchases, for instance, and especially gender purchases in the center, or other gender initiatives, as we were talking about, all of those risks pay in a good way and pay for the communities and pay for the businesses, which is what we have already said and what research says. So I'm not going to go very deep on that. But you asked for the capabilities and what happens when that bet is done. So basically, what we've seen in Juan Valdez is that you don't not only achieve an economic support to communities, which is what you just said, but you also see a multidimensional support happening, which is financial support, access to land, access to education, which we have also talked about, and I'm sure that we're going to talk about it next. And what this brings is development. What this brings is growth, because women invest 90% of their income in their families and communities, and this is a fact. So that's the thing about investing and betting for inclusive purchases, and in particular betting on women. And what about the consumer? The consumer loves it, because we have to have in mind who is going to consume on the other end. Consumers just love what they are seeing when they see it as a transparent, or as a, how do you say that, as an initiative that comes from the heart, that it's truthful, and that it's directly benefiting not only the company but mostly the communities. So that's what I can say about the challenges and how we overcome them.
Excellent. Thanks, Camila. And I'm sure we've all read reports about how the return on investment is so much higher in women-owned businesses, quite frankly. So it's a bet I'd want to take. So thank you for that perspective. And then finally, Khalida, you spoke very powerfully in your intro about economic inclusivity in your society in Pakistan. And I would love for you to speak a little bit through that lens about what organizations can do to really engage with that talent, the innovation, all the energy that's there, and really help nurture it and grow it.
Thank you so much, Imran. So the biggest issue that we actually faced from the beginning when we started to work on economic empowerment for women was the poverty mindset. This is a very, very strange thing for me to say, because the understanding came from my family. I always question the fact that why do poor people stay poor? Why does that happen in developing countries so much? And learning that we actually grew up in slum communities. I had the best childhood. It was awesome. We had nothing, but it was amazing. But learning to see poverty and how we develop from that, how we come to the middle class or lower middle class even, which is a big progress. And that is a very interesting fact, because a lot of people cling to the fact that income is today, it won't come tomorrow. And these are the people who only survive on wage labor, which is actually majority of our communities. They would earn the same day's worth and they would go home and they would spend it that day because there are so many needs. And the other thing is, even if they save a little bit for the week or for the month, the idea that, oh, wow, we actually have so much, we've never made this before, they stop working on the businesses they were working on. So there's these two issues that were coming up so much. We had to tell these women that they have to make money from money. They had to make income from income, which was it would blow their minds if we talk about that, because they're like, tomorrow we'll work again and tomorrow we will earn again. Or if they had earned enough, how to make them understand that they need to go back. They need to earn even more. It's okay to make money. It's not a problem. And this was actually our biggest challenge, because even if you change their mindsets, even if you tell them to go back to work, to invest into their businesses, how are we as a business, how are we as an organization helping them survive that? How are we helping them scale? Because the problem also came from us. Our nonprofit was just a nonprofit. We would go and do projects and work on their behavioral change and have limited time. But then changing that whole scenario of a nonprofit organization to begin from creating the product to whole supply chain and to get it to the markets and then to see if it actually sells, we had to shift everything for us. And then the understanding was that when we do change the minds of the poor people, the poor communities, to invest back into their businesses, we must always give them a sustainable market, because that is a huge problem in developing countries. Our political systems can change instantly. One morning we can wake up and there's chaos on the streets. And the media has changed so much, people who have phones are able to do more, or now online sales have increased, and the women in tribal areas don't even know what online e-commerce is. So things like that, how to catch up with all that in a changing community like this, we had to always shift. And of course, eventually what we had to do was, I'm very, very much in love with local markets. I love the fact that even if the globe is organized, coming to be this whole small community. We are connected together through internet. We actually can create small markets, the local markets, when people are selling their produce to each other, where they're creating a local economy that's growing from within. And so we are striving for that now, and that has been amazingly helpful. Of course, as a leader, I continue to see the issues in our, the flaws in our system, but it has been so effective that the women who were not even able to say their name are now selling, what do you call pakoda, like spiced food in front of schools, or the men who were not letting their women even like make hand-embroidered things for hair because they thought it was a very intimate thing to make and sell. They're now taking their products themselves to the market to give to the shopkeeper to sell those products. And just seeing the progress like that, we know that at the end of the day, we are going to have to be the one who keeps giving that sustainable market, even if the communities, the political system changes, no matter what. But at the end of the day, also letting them know that if they don't want to be poor anymore, they're going to have to learn to invest back into their businesses. Hope this helps answer the question.
Absolutely, that was so insightful, and you've all interpreted the question, from your own unique vantage points, your own unique positions, and I think that's just been outstanding. And I could do this for several more hours with you, quite frankly. Unfortunately, we have run out of time, and I know there are some fantastic sessions to follow as part of the program. But on a personal note, I would love to run a roundtable with you guys, because I know that we've barely scratched the surface of the contributions and insights that you could make, and maybe I can engineer that somehow behind the scenes. But in the meantime, just remains for me to say thank you so much to each of you for sharing those insights. Thank you so much, and hopefully you'll participate in the rest of the program for today. I'm going to hand over now to the MC to take over from here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.